found myself becoming angrier and angrier and angrier.
Where did the inspiration for that game come? Because it's a really unique idea.
I started to play with other players who I thought were unworthy of my healing.
Yeah, did the game do well in the game jam?
It scored pretty good, but
designing around healing to make that fun just seems like a huge challenge.
Only way you can design it is if you have 10 years of experiencing in healing.
Welcome to the Dev Dream Podcast, featuring conversations to keep both you and me inspired on our journey of making games. Today, I got to sit down with Brano, who is the developer for a game called Healed to Death. Now, you may not have heard of it, but it's a game that was crafted out of his frustration with healing mechanics, and to date has made an estimated $55,000. He does talk about how that puts him in this really weird place where he's not successful enough to quite go full time, but he's also certainly not a beginner and has had good success on Steam. So I talked about this, got all of his ideas and advice on healing mechanics, how he was able to make that game, and lots more game dev and YouTube related. Now, if you enjoy this conversation, you can help me out by hitting subscribe, and I'm about 80 subscribers away from hitting a new YouTube feature called Hype, which would really help me out in growing this channel. So please, if you enjoy it, consider hitting that subscribe button. And that's all. I'm really excited to share this conversation. Here we go. You have released a successful game on Steam called Healed to Death. I guess success is relative, so we can get your thoughts on how it all played out. But your Steam description for that game says, Healed to Death is a single-player roguelite where you play as the healer. The gameplay is inspired by healing in MMORPGs. Manage a party, heal your allies, explore dungeons, and destroy undead monsters with healing and support spells. Where did the inspiration for that game come? Because it's a really unique idea.
Oh yeah, so this started back in 2008 where I gave healing a try in World of Warcraft, and I was enjoying it for a bit until I started to play with other players who I thought were unworthy of my healing. And I went through this cycle over a decade where I get a little bored of playing other roles in the game and I give healing a try. I begin to have fun. And then I have to play with people who I deem unworthy. And I found myself becoming angrier and angrier and angrier at other people like I've never felt before. So part of me really wanted to make a healer game from like just being a teenager and playing MMORPGs in that role. So I felt like, all right, I can't be the only one who feels this way. Let's go for that as an idea. So I originally made that to explore the idea in the GMTK Game Jam 2023. 48 hours, I made this basic prototype called Healer Quest, and it was insane. I put like 30 hours in a 48-hour period just making that game. It was definitely the hardest I've ever worked at a game jam. I never want to do it again. But yeah, I was like, hey, this idea actually has some potential. So I just went with it. And then the game got released after 20 months of hard work.
Yeah, did the game do well in the game jam?
No, the game did very poorly. So it scored pretty good, but because it was a Windows and Linux download and no one wants to download executables in a game jam, it got like a 40 or 50% rating reduction. So it ended up being in the bottom third. But I got a couple I think what really tipped me off that other people wanted this type of game was that I got a YouTube comment complaining about how you've got all these small independent developers making really crappy healer games and that they should all team up and make like a proper game. And I'm like, maybe not the advice I'm going to take, but I am going to I'm going to take the hint that, hey, I want to experience a slightly higher quality, slightly higher ambition healer game. And so I'm like, all right, maybe not agree with the methodology, but I can see the pain point.
Yeah, I was watching a video essay, and I cannot remember which game it was. Somebody else that released a game after a game jam. They didn't do that well in the jam, like by the rating, but they talked about how they did get a lot of really good feedback and the people liked like the core mechanics of the game. Is that something you experienced with it too?
Yeah. So basically, I think because the game is so niche, most people aren't going to get it. Like, you kind of have to have experience, not in just MMORPGs, but with the healing mechanic of MMORPGs to kind of understand what the game was. So it's obviously not going to do well. But if you are making a niche game, even if the ratings aren't great, if you're getting like detailed feedback on people who are showing sincere interest, I find that that is far more valuable than like a broad high rating. Like, yeah, it was fun. Great job. It's like you really want to see how much time people are spending on your game.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Another thing that I found just really impressive as I looked through the game is that you created 35 unique healers for the game. So just
Not
how
unique healers. Not unique healers.
or heroes, I mean, to join your
Heroes,
party.
yeah.
So yeah, and my understanding is that you kind of like draft a team and then they're going out like that's your MMO squad and then you work to heal them. Is that right? Is that how the game
Yeah,
works?
so basically you have to create a 5-party squad. You get a tank, free DPS, and then you get to pick your healer. So 35 is sort of it's me. I've got 9 character models that I'm like just doing a mix and matching. I'm using recolors and stuff to stretch the models that I had. And I'm just mixing them with spells and all that to create new, like unique outcomes. To where, all right, you have to draft your team that got different strengths and weaknesses because there's a bunch of loot that drops within the game, and so you want to try to make sure that you're covering every single piece of loot. Like every single piece of loot is going to be somewhat useful, so you can be powerful during the run. So it's kind of like you create sort of like the main character, which can play as a healer, and then you create like just a party member archetype, and then based on like a couple of different flags, you can get some unique behaviors and stuff. So the tanks will typically be in front, and they have a aura that makes the enemies attack them, so that's how they tank. And then the DPS, based on the range of the spell, they'll either run into melee or they will cast range abilities and stuff. So 35, I there's some creativity to get to that 35, but there's a good like amount of diversity within the hero selection. But it's definitely more like it's a bit of a stretch to say 35, but it is 35 technically because you are picking up to 35 heroes. It's just, but they're not like all completely unique designed. It's more using already programmed behavior.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense of how you accomplished that. Did you work on this game fully solo? Did you have any help, or how did that kind of workflow look like for you?
So I think this is best described as a mostly solo or a sort of solo game. So I did get a artist for the character 3D models. That's why they're good, because I've got no artistic skills myself. I also, at my local Gamedev event, I had 2 people approach me asking if they could volunteer on the project. So I had one person make like 1 or 2 3D models for me, which I just used as props around various levels. And then I had another person who got like really involved because they were like stuck making their own game. So this person did all the textures for like the dungeon floors, walls, and roofs, as well as a bunch of dungeon music for like an ambient theme. I was like, all right, sure. Are you sure? Because I don't have any money to pay you. And I'm like, and they just wanted it because I'm like, man, I just want to create something. So I got that and I felt very, very lucky. And yeah, like it was really awesome that he did that. Everything else though was me. I'd definitely say so sort of solo, but I also had 3 people help me out.
Sure.
One person got some rev share for it. The other 2 were volunteers, and I'm really grateful for all of them helping out.
Yeah, that is really interesting. I have not heard of anyone offering to volunteer their time on a game, but honestly, if you're a really small dev and you're stuck, it's probably not a bad way to get into a game, and then that person gets to see the game on Steam and follow the journey. So do you think they came away from it feeling like it was a positive experience to join in? Have you had any chats
Oh
with them
yeah,
post
one
launch?
Oh yeah, 100%. I still occasionally he checks up on me, I check up on him. Unfortunately, the games that he wants to make, especially like the major volunteer, they don't align with what I want to make. So I'm like, and plus our skill sets don't really complement each other. So it's like, damn, I really want to help you and give back, but I just don't have. Yeah, it's just not working out that way. But the thing is, the game dev scene where I'm at, we used to have AAA in my city. Like we had the studio who was like the support studio of BioShock, and then I think they led BioShock 2 and then the Borderland prequels. So pretty successful teams. But unfortunately, due to the Australian dollar during a period of time being worth more than the American dollar, the American owners went, "You guys are way too expensive. We're shutting everything down." And it just completely decimated the local game dev scene. So from the ashes, we've had a couple of ex-staff members try to keep the game dev scene aligned in Canberra, and from there, I've come in and started making my own game. And there's this kind of blooming indie scenes. I don't think there's a huge amount of flowers yet, but you're beginning to see the sprouts. You're beginning to see the potential of more and more people are making more and more competent games. And so I think there's just this real movement in my city of where people can see this growth trajectory of things are just getting better in the local game dev scene. And so
Yeah,
I
I've
think there's
heard.
just a yeah.
No, go ahead.
Oh, so I think there's just this there's a real feeling of optimism where you kind of want to help each other out in ways that you can. Because if one person succeeds, it just means it's just easier for everyone else to succeed.
Yeah, I've heard stories of, like a big company either losing employees or shutting down, and then those devs kind of doing their own thing or joining small teams. Do you feel like even though that major company shut down, that having those strong devs in the scene actually has kind of made it better, or did losing people that probably had to move and go find something else, did it actually maybe hurt the scene overall?
Oh, it completely decimated it. It like when I say they've been like working hard, I mean it's been like a decade until you started to see any form of life. So you did have like a couple of individuals succeed quite greatly. So we've got a really high-end VR guy. Like he led the team behind Superhot VR. So cutting edge.
Right.
We've also had we also have a developer who's been working since 1999. I think his one of his more recent games were like Void Bastards. So we still got people who are coping, but it was decimated. So
Yeah.
really, it is a story about just consistently just going through the process, just enjoying what you've got, and then a decade later, something is beginning to happen with a growing indie scene. So I get to experience a lot of the fruits without a lot of the labor.
Yeah, well, it's too bad the scene was hit so hard. I definitely hope that it continues to sprout and grow. Jumping back to your game, I hear about drafting that team of heroes, and that actually sounds like the most interesting part to me as a person that enjoys roguelites. So, as you designed the game, how did you balance or try to, both make healing fun, but then also have this draft mechanic? Is that something people are drawn to? Or do you find that most people are really playing the game to get that healer kind of kick?
I think it is such a mix. So you've got people who really like the drafting and stuff, and I always really enjoy like optimizing loot drops, trying to optimize a good team. With the healing side, I think that is like the major selling point of what makes it unique. So a lot of people, I would say a lot of the kind of YouTubers who covered the game roguelike YouTubers who had played a healer in the past. So that's sort of like what was appealing to them the most. Uh, it was really hard to design because in a traditional roguelike, you can just rely on number go up, and that makes the game fun.
Mhm.
That doesn't work with healing
Ugh.
because with like damage, you can just accelerate it and you can accelerate enemy health pools as well. And it's just this kind of complementary factory where, oh, I feel more or powerful, but then in turn it's like, all right, I'll make the enemies more powerful. And but you get this constant positive feedback loop into making everything more powerful. With healing, because the health bars are limited, if you increase your healing by too much, you trivialize the game. Like the difference between a healing spell being 20 or 30% more effective than it once was, like it turns any form of challenge into a trivialization. And it's like becomes impossible to balance. So, um, in order to make the healing fun, instead of like focusing on necessarily making the spells objectively more powerful, I had to make the spells do more interesting things. So take a spell like Greater Heal. Like you in 3.5 seconds, you spend 600 mana to heal for 2,000. So 3.5 seconds is a big cast. That's a long time. But you could have like an upgrade that if you start the heal and the target has 15 or less percent HP of like their total max HP, you reduce the cast time by 50%. And then you add another upgrade that makes the cast an instant cast. So it's not really about making the spell do objectively more healing. It's more like providing a condition that lets you use the spell in a unique way. And because I originally had like plus 10% healing, and I'm like, this is boring and it breaks the game. I can't have it. So, but with the kind of like the party member side, that could that worked with number go up. I could just do number go up with that.
Mhm.
That was a lot easier to design.
Yeah, I was really curious to ask you this question because designing around healing to make that fun just seems like a huge challenge for like a lot of the
It
reasons that you
is
said.
it is so complicated. It is so complicated, and the only way you can design it is if you have 10 years of experiencing in healing and being unbelievably critical of design choices by previous designers. Just going, these guys have no idea what they're doing. And uh or if they do a really good job, it's like this designer is kick ass. I need to find out who designed this class in this way because they're amazing. And then you find out they got fired by the company.
Yeah, that's sad. I really liked your greater heal example there because whenever you add in that element of needing to do the healing at the proper time, you start to now add in all these interesting elements of kind of like maximizing your heals. Did you play around with any other kind of like either buffs to the party, or is a lot of the healing mechanics around like timings and things like that? Or were there any other things you found to be successful in making it fun?
So the big thing you've got to work with is direct healing output, conditional healing, and mana management. So with the mana management, you could just reduce mana. Alternatively, so in WoW, there's something called like the 5 second rule, where if you don't cast a spell or if you don't use mana for 5 seconds, you'll start a accelerated mana regeneration rate. So I decided to kind of put that on crack and make it so that, all right, you're going to have all these spells that cost, like some spells that cost 0 mana, but they don't heal for very much.
Good.
So instead of like sitting around and doing nothing, you can cast a 0 mana cost spell, which can increase your mana. But there are ways where you can make it so that those 0 mana cost spells could suddenly heal a lot in a specific condition, or you can have really mana expensive spells that can be free in certain conditions. So there's too many examples to where it actually I completely forget all the things I've done. But yeah, I I'd have to go through the list of every single example of like, oh yeah, I did this to solve this problem. It's like, oh, if you cast this in this point, you gain a damage reduction buff on your tank, which makes it way better. And yeah,
Yeah, I'm
there's
seeing a
just a
lot
lot of
of the
examples like that.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of the levers you can pull to create interesting situations for the player. Were there any games in particular that you used as inspiration, either because you really liked what they had, or I mean, you've already mentioned the frustrations of some of the things you were trying to solve, but were there any games out there that they do have like really good and interesting healer classes that you kind of pulled inspiration from?
So the big one is, of course, World of Warcraft. I feel like there's so much good design intention with how many of those classes worked. And I found if you ever play on private servers with people who aren't good designers, you'll see them continually break spells or make spells completely redundant.
Mm.
So I played a lot of Guild Wars 2 as well at some point. I didn't really like the healing in that, but World of Warcraft was the main inspiration for me. Also, Warhammer Online. There's a lot of stuff from Warhammer Online, which I feel like a much worse designed game from a class perspective, but still some interesting ideas that I could kind of take from that. But definitely, WoW. I really think that the class design team is really smart in that game.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Continuing on the theme of healing, you made a YouTube video that I found very interesting talking about healing as a choice, as being bad game design. If you remember going back to that video,
Yep.
kind of what did you mean by that, and did that affect your game at all?
So this was purely a critique of Hades and how they handled their healing mechanic in the roguelike. So it's not really referring to like a healing game type of healing. It's just uh it's in regards to when you get like a choice of power or like just healing yourself up within a game with limited healing. What I tended to find is that while I was playing Hades, if I did the fight well and I got a power and I got to choose between like healing or a power up, if I could choose the power up, that made every single subsequent room within Hades easier. So I would take less damage because the room was easier, which means I was more likely to pick a power up, which means I was more likely to take less damage, which means when to get the choice again, I'm more likely to choose a power up. Where inversely, if I did poorly in a room, I was going to have to choose the healing. And then from that choice alone, I was going to be weaker for the rest of the rooms. So I was more likely to take damage, which means I was more likely to choose healing. And so one path led to a positive feedback loop, and the other path led to a negative feedback loop. And I personally didn't like that from a player perspective. So I was just going into why do roguelikes do this? And why did I not have fun in this particular, like, why did I find this element of the game not engaging? And so it was just me trying to work out, like, reverse engineer the fun and the dissatisfaction I had with that particular part of Hades. Because I just found I was designing my builds entirely around not ending up in the negative feedback loop, not being in a scarcity mindset, being in an abundancy mindset where I could continue to choose the cool upgrades that were actually fun rather than just, yeah, I need to make up for mistakes. It's
Yeah, that makes a lot
basically
of
like a
sense.
payday lane serve. Like basically what they added was a payday lane loan
Mm,
service within their game,
yeah, that's a good way of
and I just didn't find it
and
fun.
the basic problem there is that you're rewarding better play and punishing worse play. And so it's kind of the opposite of like Mario Kart, which, you know, has its own design problems and what makes a game fun. But whenever you're already struggling and then you have to give up a power up that would help you struggle less, that can lead to a really unfun loop. When you were working on that essay, did you come across any games or ideas that can minimize that or alternative for roguelike games?
Yeah, so a big one is with Dome Keeper. So one of the issues with Hades in comparison is that you want all the upgrades, you want all the power. It's not like you have a limited amount of slots. Where in Dome Keeper, because you have a limited amount of slots, you kind of have to like if you have to choose the healing in that game, it's not like you're permanently disabled. It's kind of like okay, cool. I don't get one of the item up like I don't get one of the item slots done. But in 15 minutes I can find a new kind of slot that I can choose. And so if I have had to take the short-term pain and get the healing, I can make up for that later. So it's kind of the difference is you just limit the amount of slots someone can choose. And so, yeah, it's like, but if it's an infinite power gain, you're going to get the healing problem. Where if it's a finite power game, you can make up for it later. So I find that's a way to alleviate the problem. It's kind of like, yeah, it's like taking a loan on zero interest or taking a loan with like 30% interest.
Mm-hmm.
Big
Yeah,
difference in
that
how
makes a
you
lot of
feel about
sense.
it.
Yeah, I even really love Hades, but it is making me question that decision. And as I think about it, that is a little bit unfun.
It
Now,
is an amazing game on so many levels. I think they should have separated healing out. That's my
yep.
one major complaint about that game. Otherwise, it's so good.
Right, right. Yeah, and I mean that's an interesting. It would be really interesting to hear if they even considered other options or if they were just locked in of like this is what feels good. So it'd be interesting to hear their point. But anyway, jumping back to your game, I'm curious if you're willing to share any numbers, and if you're not, just say pass. We'll cut it out of the edit or something. But with Healed to Death, how much revenue have you brought in, or how many copies, or whatever you're willing to share on that point?
I'm pretty transparent. So I think I'm at now 96K gross USD. That goes down, but that's like gross. So that's like the maximum number. That
Right.
goes down to 74K USD once you consider all the taxes and refunds. Unfortunately, there was a pretty big Vulkan issue with Godot. So Vulkan is like the graphics 3D rendering. And there's been some compatibility issues where for some people the game just does not like the graphics do not load correctly and just continues to break, or they get this massive white light and I can't reproduce it. It's so annoying. It seemed to like impact a lot of AMD drivers, unfortunately.
Ugh.
So I had a pretty high refund rate purely because of technical issues from graphics drivers. But yeah, like once I do themes cut and the rev share with the artist who did my character models, I end up with about 32,000 USD in my bank account before income tax. So it's like it's not a small amount, but it's not a quit your job amount. It's right on that danger zone of like, oh, it's tempting. It's tempting because I am a very cheap person. I do not live on a lot. But yeah, like it's right on that like it's really tempting. But I'm pretty happy with 32K USD in my bank account.
Yeah, it's such an interesting place to be. You mentioned before we jumped on the call that you're kind of like in this intermediate game dev section where you've made what a lot of people would consider successful, but yeah, like you said, maybe not quit your job money. So, what did you have any expectations going into the release of this game, and how close were you to meeting those?
So before Next Fest, I had like 600 wish lists. It was not looking good. It was not looking optimistic. But I managed to get like 2,500 wish lists in the final 2 months. But it was still like only 3,000 wish lists at launch. And according to everything I read, it's like that's not good. But to me, I was just like, the game's good. I would buy my own game. I enjoy my own game. So it's gotta have some potential. So I was hoping for like 3,000 total sales within a year, but it ended up getting like over 6,000. So it's performed above expectations, which is good. I was expecting it to be like, well, it's my first game. Well, it's my first commercial game. So um yeah, it's performed above expectations, but still it's like it could have been better. It's definitely. I'm pretty happy with it though. I'm not going to be negative. I am really happy with how it's done. Yeah, but I've got to make games that sell more in order to justify a career out of this. So at the moment, it still remains a hobby.
How long did you spend working on the game?
So 20 months total. So that's like 1 year, 8 months. So 1.67 years.
And if you could go back, knowing what you know now and taking your whole experience, is there anything through the 20 months that you would do differently? Or maybe even looking ahead to commercial game number 2, what are some things you've taken away that you might try to approach differently?
So I'll answer both questions. So in terms of like going back in time and redoing parts of development, oh, I really don't know. I think I would have done more work on the user interface side of things. That's the one thing. And obviously, if I have like a crystal ball, I'd be able to save my time with throwing out gameplay ideas that just didn't work. But I think I worked pretty much as efficiently as I could with the skills and the knowledge I had at the time. I'm really happy with how things developed. In terms of bringing lessons learned from my future projects, number one is that I wanted to make smaller games. Um, I have no idea how how I completed Heal to Death in 20 months. It's just like, how does this even make sense? I cannot believe I did this much because it's a pretty like it's a reasonably ambitious game, and so I still can't really work that out. Uh, but it also just got me to think a lot more about the sort of appeal and the marketing side of game dev. And I think the problem is that I'm still trying to work out exactly how to make marketable ideas because I'm kind of still a bit selfish with the types of games I make. Like, I have to want to make them, I have to want to play them, I have to want to be a consumer of the product. And this leads me to be a little bit narrow-minded. And so I'm just trying to expand the scope of where if I see like any form of justification with an idea that I want externally, I'm like, all right, cool. That's the market research done. I'm going to make that game. So
Yeah,
that's yeah.
have you started any work on a game 2? Or I guess how long, I didn't look this up, how long has it been since you released Healed to Death? Actually, I think you mentioned maybe 6 or 8
April.
months.
Yeah,
Okay.
it was
It's
April.
released in
So
April.
April
Okay.
last year. So it hasn't
So
even been a year out.
yeah.
It feels ages ago.
Yeah.
Feels like
Have
it's
you
been ages ago. Yeah.
what have you been doing with your game dev time since then? Are you locked into a project number 2? Are you prototyping?
Yeah,
What are you
locked
doing these
into
days?
project number 2.
Okay.
So I kind of know you had a guest on before, which is Fornity.
Who?
And he made a video on Christmas, I think, or maybe it was the launch of his game, where he launched his game and he was so excited about how well it was doing, and then he just felt this immense amount of blues where like, I don't feel the excitement anymore. And it's just like, yep, I know how that feels, which
Ugh.
is it's your classic a person who enjoyed the journey is sad he reached the destination.mp4 video. And so I kind of know that I suffer from that as well. I'm very much a enjoy the process type of person. So I was already planning my next idea, before I had released Heal to Death. Unfortunately, it wasn't a good idea. It was an RTS game, an even more ambitious game. Kind of, I wanted to
Yeah.
learn net coding. So I
Oh
was
my
like, all right,
goodness.
if this doesn't work like out, at least I've learned how to net code. So I made a really basic prototype of a like RTS that I wanted to make in a controller. Turns out somebody had already made that. It's called Tooth and Tail. And so I made that prototype. I played Tooth and Tail, and I kind of realized I did not particularly enjoy Tooth and Tail, and
Hmm.
yet it was a significantly better game that I could make. Why the hell am I making an RTS? This is pointless. Throw this out. So then I tried to make like a 3D Hades kind of. I just had like a really basic kind of capsule prototype, and I sort of realized at that point as well, like there's no way I can make a game that I would want to play. So I had to
Mm.
throw that out. And then I'm like, all right, let's see if I can team up with an artist. And no one in my local game dev scene wanted to work with me at that point because they had all had their own project. It's very programmer heavy and not very artist heavy. So if the artists are busy, it's like, damn, I don't have anyone to work with. Um, so I teamed up and did a game jam with an American, and we participated in GMTK 2025. Really cool guy. We wanted kind of different games, but I was like, all right, I've got no better ideas. Maybe I'll work with you. But he was getting married at the same time, and so I started a prototype, just like a Dome Keeper clone. Like I was like, all right, what would happen if Dome Keeper was top down?
Yeah.
And I just really fell in love with the prototype. So I played Dome Keeper last year, and it was my favorite game that I played that year. Such good design, and yeah, I was like, that I really like this prototype, and so then I was like, I wonder if there are any kind of Dome Keeper clones. What's the quality of the Dome Keeper clone? And so I played a bunch of those. I played a bunch of demos, and what I realized is that the Dome Keeper clones are not really clones. They're like clearly inspired by Dome Keeper, but they do one or two core things very differently, which reduced my enjoyment of the game substantially. So I'm
Mm.
like, all right, let's see what the reviews and see if other people feel the same way about me. And what I found was a number of people directly comparing it to Dome Keeper. And some people wanted a unique experience. Some people were disappointed that it wasn't Dome Keeper. So I was like, aha, there are people who are disappointed it wasn't Dome Keeper. All right. Other people feel the same way as me. I think there is some market opportunity with this. So I just went ahead and started to make a Dome Keeper clone, like top-down Dome Keeper, seeing what the top-down element can do. And I found, and unfortunately, it's not as much as I would have liked design-wise in terms of making it unique, but I found a couple of elements that I can, like, say, oh, no, Dome Keeper couldn't do things like this because it's a kind of like side-scroller, you go down
Mhm.
into a mine. So I was able to find some unique things to make the game different,
Yeah,
design-wise at least.
that sounds like a really interesting idea. You mentioned you spent 20 months on your first project and that you want to make smaller games. Do you think you'll accomplish that with this one? Do you have a hope?
100%. 100%. Like, I am looking to get this game functionally, like, complete by the end of January. And so I
Nice.
started in August. So this is going to be, what, like a 5-month development cycle? And I only plan on releasing in April. And what this means is I get this real nice 3-month back burner period where I get to kind of take a break from it. I get to see people play test it. And then because I've spent some time away from it, but I'm still like got the code kind of fresh in my mind, I I can like begin to see real flaws within the game. So that's sort of the same thing I did with Heal to Death. In March, I took a bit of a break from it to start working on the RTS prototype. And when I came back to it, I could see a bunch of small, tiny things I could improve about the game. So I really am a big fan of starting a project before you release your next one. And like just having a break before you release it just to gain a bit of perspective. As you get too used to your game otherwise.
Yeah, that's a really smart idea. Do you have any idea about how many hours a week you're spending on the game for people to have context of how much time you're putting into it?
Oh, so I spend almost all my free time
Mm,
on making games. So I'm probably putting like 20 to 25 hours a week while I'm at work.
yeah, that's pretty significant. Um, I'm curious, jumping back to Healed to Death for just a little bit. Have you seen any sales after your initial spike? Like, I'm really curious right now in this kind of mindset of can you build a catalog of small games that can continue to give you monthly income? Or if they're too small, do they just kind of die? So, what's your experience been?
So I've only got experience with one product, Heal to Death. And fortunately, because the idea of a healer roguelike, there's no other game like it. There's no other 3D healer roguelike out on the market that I can tell. Um, I kind of have decent tail sales. So
Mm,
I'm getting about 330 sales a month.
that's quite nice.
Um, it's pretty good. Like it's like as it's cool. Yeah, it's continually selling. Mostly during sales periods
Hmm.
and stuff. But I do think that like so certain games are going to be burn and churn. Um, but I think there are going to be other games where they're just going to continually get sales because they don't become outdated. Because the idea is unique enough to where people will say like, well, I don't need the latest game. I've got this game on my wish list. Oh, it's 30% off. All right, I'll give it a try. And yeah, it's managing to make pretty decent recurring revenue. I did some research on this prior like while I was releasing, and typically what I've found is that your first week sales will sell like you'll get 3 times the amount of sales within a year, and then about 4.2 times the sales in the second year. So it is a pretty big
Mm.
drop off. Uh, but I found that like I just took my first week sales to first month sales. I did a bit of a calculation on where I sat within like the average. So I think it was slightly below what the average survey results were. I just did that calculation, and so far I'm pretty close to matching that. So it does look like within 1 year I should sell about 3 times my like original uh 1 week or 1 month sales. I forget which or what the specific statistic was, but I would say yeah, you should continue to expect sales over time.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And I do know some other devs are playing around with ideas of having some success with bundles and a second visibility round, which I don't exactly know what that one means, but things to think about for anybody that has a game released. Did you do any marketing for the game?
So I only started to learn about video game marketing around the end of development, back when Chris Zakowski was starting to kick off, and now he's basically seen as Lord Jesus himself. Uh, so uh, I only was contacting game dev YouTubers at the end of development. I mean sorry, not game dev YouTubers, game yeah, gaming YouTubers at the end of development.
Yeah.
I had accumulated this big list of like 150 people I wanted to contact. I'd say about 50 of them were roguelike YouTubers, 100 of them were MMORPG streamers and YouTubers and stuff. And so I contacted them at the end. Um, what I found was that the roguelike YouTubers were very kind of interested in trying out new games. The MMORPG YouTubers, they had their game, they had their audience who only want them to watch that game.
Yeah.
So very little interest on the MMORPG side. Like I thought it would have interested them, but they're mono gamers. And what I kind of later learned is that you'd never want to cater to mono gamers because
Mm.
they don't have time for anything else. They've got daily rewards and social events going on in game that they have to do. So yeah, they're just not interested in kind of indie games in that phase of their life. Maybe they'll change.
And that makes a lot of sense too when you think about their audience. I mean, if they are publishing on one game, a lot of their audience isn't going to tune in for something else. So it does kind of make sense for them. Speaking of YouTube, I had a great time kind of browsing through your channel as I was doing some research for this podcast. Something that you talk about is various kind of video essays on different game design decisions. And I'm just curious if you have any of those videos recently that stood out, or a favorite game design kind of philosophy that you've dove into on the channel.
So I think a lot of those videos are very context specific, but I'll give you like my overarching idea of game design philosophy. Um, Fun is really complicated, and you can get really philosophical about it. And to simplify it, I would just say be a gamer. You should know what fun is as a gamer. Like, you're not going to find fun as a game developer and a game designer. You're going to find fun as a gamer. Now, as a designer, it's your job to try and work out how that fun is created. Really, I don't think we can logically work out what is going to be fun, but we can reverse engineer the fun that we had as a gamer and work out why you felt that way. What systems led me to feeling this kind of moment of fun? Which mechanics did not lead to a fun experience, and reverse engineering why I felt that way. I think I made a video recently about consumables and how often it's so difficult to get the balance of them correct. Because if you have too many consumables, or you can like buy them all the time, it stops really being a consumable. It just becomes an item. And what I find is that in games like that, I feel like using them is like cheating. It's like I'm specifically not allowed to use them because they trivialize the game mechanics. Because it's like, oh, I'm playing Pokemon. I can just spam full restores nonstop until I get a lucky miss, and then I can finally attack the other dude. I find that to be lame. Alternatively, I've got this massive scarcity mindset, where I'm never going to use the resource because there's a limited amount, and I don't know what's up ahead. I may need that. And I talk about a couple of games which managed to find this crazy balance of where you have to use your consumables to proceed, but then it's kind of like rotate between types of consumables. So that's something that the original System Shock did. Well, maybe not the original, the remake. The remake did quite well, which is you start off with like two types of, like, a gun with a certain type of ammunition. You run out. You use your gun with the other type of ammunition. You run out. You use your grenades. You use your berserk patches, which give you increased melee damage. And then finally, you have enough ammunition for your first gun. And so you just rotate between this consumable treadmill. And I found that designed to work. But so largely what I'm about is experiencing fun as a gamer first, and then reverse engineering that to try and work out why I felt this way, what worked, what didn't, and how this can be applied to my game, because it's so context dependent.
Yeah, and it's I mean, it kind of is the fun of being a dev in a lot of ways, because it is a little bit abstract, and that reverse engineering can be a lot of fun when you can figure it out. I definitely fall into the meme of consumable gamers, where I get to the end of the game and I have like a full inventory of like super high valuable resources.
It's not your fault. That's not your fault. Don't blame the gamer for it. That's a game design issue. I absolutely despise when gamers have their favorite game and they've got a clear design fault with their game. It's like, well, you just have to know all the faults of the game design beforehand and then work around it. No, that's not okay.
Right. Yeah, it's a hard problem to solve. One game it did make me think of that I enjoyed was Doom Eternal. It's kind of like that game that you were mentioning, where you kill an enemy and you get different types of ammo, and so then your favorite gun eventually runs out of ammo, so you have to switch to something else, and you're kind of constantly using all of these resources. So
yeah, it's
so that was
such
a lot
a
of fun.
good design method in FPS games. Really hard to balance.
Yep.
Really hard to balance. Requires a fine-tooth comb, but it is achievable.
Yeah, and it's so interesting because consumables are something that is almost synonymous with video games. I mean, most games have some type of consumable, and a lot of them are done in this sort of mediocre way, which is really interesting. Um, Something else that you've talked about on your channel in trying to not be mediocre is game dev tutorials. I can't remember if you've done tutorials yourself or not, but, and maybe this question was coming from a video essay, but how do you actually make a game dev tutorial that doesn't suck?
So, are we talking about specific teaching game developers game dev, or are we talking about game design tutorials? Like for trying to teach people your game?
Yeah, I
Because I made
think the
videos
first
on both
one.
of them.
Yeah,
All right,
either
so
one
game
that you want to answer
developers.
about.
All right, game developers. I'll go with game developers. So, I am a big believer that the master should not be teaching the beginner because the master has completely forgotten what it's like to be a beginner. Things become very obvious. I remember in university, I had this lecturer that I fucking despised, despite him being a very, very smart individual, where he was trying to teach like abstract mathematics. And I did not understand him through his thick Russian accent. And he kept on saying, "It is obvious. It is self-evident." I'm like, this guy, and I just remember, so anytime I hear people complain about like tutorials not being made by people who know what they're doing, I'm like, do you even remember what it's like to be a newbie? So I made a big Vampire Survivors tutorial back in 2022, back when Godot 4 was in beta. So I felt like quite proud of myself. I made the first Vampire Survivors clone tutorial for Godot and the first step-by-step tutorial for Godot 4. So that's like was an achievement there. And the big thing I wanted to do was focus on every single pitfall I fell in as a beginner because I knew this is the final year where I remember what it's like to be a beginner. And I was a big fan of trying to teach practical and then theory. Because like in the traditional education system, they teach theory first, and then maybe if you're lucky, they'll teach you practical. Where I'm like, look, being a beginner game dev really sucks. It's really boring a lot of the once the initial excitement is out. Not knowing how to use this complex engine is intimidating. So we're just going to make progress. I'm going to show you all the progress. Here's how you make progress. And then at the very end of the video, I'll be like, all right, we're not going to spend the next 4 minutes talking about the theory behind why we did this. Like, why does this work? What is delta time? Like, what is a node? And I used an example of myself by like swapping out nodes, changing clothes. And yeah, so I'm a big believer in practical first, theory second. When it comes down to like more specific tutorials on how to solve things, fast and quick. Just fast and quick. Respect that the person is like has some knowledge of the engine. Just give them this solution and then move on. That's the best way of doing kind of more of a specific tutorial. So I find that those two styles, a slow step-by-step where you do practical and then theory afterwards, that's the best way of teaching a beginner. And then for more very specific things, you just teach people how to do it. If people want to learn the theory about something, they've got to do it themselves, really, on like the more kind of like small specific stuff. And you should expect them to. Because I tried making a more complex tutorial afterwards, and I'm like, there is no way I can make a coherent tutorial with complex system design. This is too complicated.
Yeah, your point about the master not teaching the student is really interesting, and it for some reason just brought up kind of my mindset with this podcast. So I'm a beginner game dev myself and have released just one teeny tiny game that is really just a pile of trash. But if you look around game dev YouTube, you'll see a lot of the big creators are starting podcasts because it's a nice and fun way to make content. But I think something unique that I can bring doing this podcast is I can be really a stand-in for a lot of the audience, which is someone that hasn't released a game, hasn't made any money, just likes the hobby. So I just found that interesting to hear about. But you also bring up some really good points about making good tutorials. Those make a lot of sense. Focusing just a little bit more on the design side, what do you think makes a good video game idea? And how do you actually, you mentioned even going through some of the different trials of trying some different games for game two. How are you thinking about finding a good idea for a game?
So it's really easy to find a game idea that is appealing and exciting. And it's really easy to find a game idea that is pragmatic and achievable. Um, Trying to find an intersection between those two things, if you were to draw like a Venn diagram, where these two things meet is very, very small. It's a slim, like it is really slim. And you can see like when someone has found a really good idea, when things become trendy. So at the moment, incremental games are like that trend. So I am planning ahead to make my own my own incremental game. Like I saw Aramis succeed, and I'm like, yeah, I can do that as well. I've got to do this. I'm an idiot for not doing this. Let's make my own incremental game. So after I get done with my Dome Keeper clone Surface Breaker, which is going to be pretty soon, I've already got a couple of plans on types of incremental games that I can make. But it's just, yeah, it's really hard. You got to consider what you like as a gamer. I really do believe that you have to like the game that you're going to make. So I've been playing a lot of incremental games, a lot of the demos as well, just trying to work out what do I like from this genre? What do I not like? Where can I find the fun? How can I be an audience member of this genre? And I've worked out like a particular part of incremental games that I really like, and I'm going to throw away all the stuff I don't like. And hopefully by that point, it's still appealing enough and fresh enough for audiences to enjoy with it. Because unfortunately, a lot of what gamers want is novelty. And eventually, when things become really flooded, the novelty wears off. And so the quality has to increase. And I think that the quality requirements for an incremental game are quite low at the moment. Like, you can make a 5 out of 10 incremental game, and people are still going to be like, I had a great time playing this. This was awesome. And that's like, okay, I can achieve that. And yeah, I found fun in the incremental genre. So I'm like, all right, I've done my part as a gamer to find the fun. Now I've just got to reverse, and now I've been doing a bunch of the reverse engineering, like just writing up a bunch of documents on why I think this was fun, why I think this made me feel this way. And just, yeah, slowly crafting up the ideas of here's how I want to approach my game. So I'm already
How
planning my next game.
Yeah, how does a developer find the overlap of that Venn diagram where they find what's fun and what they can achieve? Do you have any advice there?
I think just playing small games. Like, you really, really, really want to become like, do not underestimate the value that comes from being a gamer. Do not underestimate the value that comes from like consuming a product that you would want to be able to make yourself. I really do not understand how developers can end up not making games. That is really just foreign to me. To me, my perception as a gamer and what I enjoy is the North Star. And then just having experience in game dev, I'll be able to know, all right, I've played this 5 out of 10 game, and it's better than anything I could make. I should not pursue this. This is the wrong direction. But if I end up playing a game that is 5 out of 10, gets sales, and I'm like, I can make a better version of this, that's a good signal that you should go into that direction. So I really think it's about like using your gamer intuition of what's fun, and then slowly building up the confidence as a developer to know what's achievable. Once you get those two, you'll be able to find the like those slim slivers of where an achievable good idea is present for your particular taste in games.
Yeah, that does sound like a really good kind of resource to lean on. It's just your own experience as a gamer. That makes a lot of sense. Now, I want to close out the podcast with just a couple questions, kind of just about your journey, learning a little bit more about you as a dev. How did you actually get into game dev?
So I gave Gamedev so many chances. I really thought the idea of being a game dev was cool, but every single time I tried to get into it, I would quit out of frustration because there were no good tutorials, and I didn't really have the knowledge to read documentation in a useful way. So I kind of would just try it and fail. Like I tried Game Maker in 2010, 2011. I tried XNA in 2012. I then had a big break to like get my career up and running for my regular job. And then once that was like established and I was stable, I tried again in 2017 with Game Maker Studio 2. I also tried Godot 2.1 back then, but back then, like, no tutorials, no resource. I don't know how to learn this engine. I then tried Game Maker Studio again in 2018, 2019. Each time I was getting closer. Each time I was getting further and learning new things. But there was something that just made me go, I'm not having fun. Then finally in 2020, I gave Godot 3.2 another chance. And at this point, you started to get these really good step-by-step tutorial series. So a guy called Heartbeast, who I'd watched a bit during Game Maker Studio 2 back in 2017, made this big kind of like action RPG tutorial. And I'm a big fan of the Game Boy Color Legend of Zelda game. So it was perfect. And so that just got me across the line and it just clicked. It just immediately clicked. And from that point, I've just been game deving every single time. In terms of like the journey after that, so about 4 or 5 months after I kind of started doing game dev again, I was able to compete in the is game jam with where he gives you like an art pack and you got to make a game with it. That was my first game that I ever released, so that was for that game jam. And then I started to make overly ambitious 3D projects, which I had to throw out. I kind of went, damn, I'm not proceeding anymore. I'm learning a lot. I'm getting good at this. I'm having fun.
Yep.
I need to release something. After that, I made the Vampire Survivors tutorial series for Godot 4. And from there, I'm like, all right, I need to release a small game on Steam just to say that I have released a game. And so I made a game called Platform Gun, where you shoot a gun, which can turn into a platform and you can ride on it. So that was like a fun half-hour experience. And after that, I got into I made Healed to Death, and now I'm working on Surface Breaker. So that's sort of like how it went on. A lot of crap to get to where I am now, but eventually I reached just this point where I'm like, I love this, and from there it's been pretty smooth sailing.
Do you hope to do it full time someday?
Yeah, definitely aiming to go full time someday. That's the ultimate goal, but I don't want to risk stability at the moment. Like, I have an opportunity to do game dev full time in a pretty near riskless fashion. And I'm like, all right, I just need like 1 or 2 more years to release enough games to get enough revenue to be like, all right, I don't really have to worry about money anymore. I can just do what I want and not have to have the other stresses of entrepreneurship.
Yeah, I think doing it with the long view in mind, not, putting yourself at risk to maybe not have a house or something like that is definitely the way to go. How are you able to make time for both game dev and YouTube, which also in of itself can be like a full-time job or a very time-consuming hobby / endeavor?
So with YouTube, I just don't put that much effort into it. My videos are pretty low quality. It's me, like I come up with an idea. I'll probably like do like a practice run in the car when I'm buying groceries about what I want to talk about, flesh out the ideas a tiny bit. And then I just once I'm like comfortable with those ideas, I will just record a video, make a thumbnail, place that up. In terms of game dev, where I do a ton of time, um it's called not having a ton of commitments. So I've got like sport, I've got the occasional social event, but otherwise I'm pretty free to do what I want in my life. And in terms of like not burning out, which I think is the big one, I've gotten so good at game dev that where it's relaxing most
You
of
know,
the time. If I'm doing something new, it it takes a lot of cognitive load. So if I am like trying to learn procedural generation for the first time, or if I'm having to create a multi-mesh instance system to reduce the amount of draw calls, that takes a big cognitive load, and I can't work all day on that. I need breaks. But if I'm doing stuff that I've done before, I find it to be very relaxing. It's sort of like me, I know, I get the same feeling as I would playing an MMORPG, where I'm kind of just going through the motions. Like I'm questing, I know where the thing is, I go to where the dot is on the map. I kill the mobs, I come back, and I find that my coding is very much like that. I know where everything is, I know what I gotta do. There's a little bit of creativity here and there, but also I planned everything else out in advance. Like I give myself like 2 hours a month to plan like the month of work I've got to do. So I'm not doing a lot of high level design while I'm designing, while I'm creating the game. It's like, all right, I get a period where I act as the designer, and then I get a month where I act as the drone who has to implement it.
yeah, being able to hit that game dev flow state sounds just incredible. And I think that's definitely a good thing to like, it's
It takes
inspiring.
time. It takes
Yeah.
time. It is achievable, but it
Hmm.
takes years. Just focus on having fun.
Hmm.
Focus on having fun, and it will all eventually come naturally. You'll find a point where you're ready to make sacrifices on what you want exactly to make a game more appealing. But if you don't feel comfortable with that at the moment, just focus on the fun. It will
Yep.
come eventually.
Yeah, someone who's less in the flow state most of the time. It's inspiring to like imagine getting there to where like most of the tasks I'm doing, I just know how to do them. Like that sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah,
Um,
I can't believe I've reached this point. It is
yeah,
incredible, but it's achievable. It really is
yeah.
achievable, but it took me what 15 years to reach this point of just trying.
What's 15 years? That's
Yeah,
easy
what's
to get
15
there.
years? Yeah.
One more question on your YouTube channel. I'm just curious if you have a purpose for the YouTube channel. Are you hoping it will help market your games or help teach people or just a creative outlet or, what is the YouTube channel for you?
So it's been a number of things. To start off, it was just a way to document my journey and to give back to the Godot community because I'd finally gone over the beginner hump. And I'm like, all right, there's a bunch of missing tutorials because Godot was still pretty small back in those days. So I'm like, all right, if I have to work something out by myself, I want to make a tutorial about it and give back to the community. And so that's sort of what it started off by. I then like saw these dev vlogs and was like, all right, I'll try this. It didn't really work out. I'm not a good YouTuber. Um, and so it eventually translated to me wanting to talk about particular game dev topics. So I started to do these like medium effort videos, which still took like hours to create once a month. But I found that I really liked talking about my ideas. I didn't like the video editing part at all.
Kind of.
So uh, I think at the beginning of 2025, I'm like, I'm just going to do these webcam vlogs now and just talk about what I want. So to me, it's not really about propelling the game. I think there are particular types of YouTubers who can like really appeal to mass. Like if you have a YouTube channel and you appeal to a mass audience, I think that can really help sell your game. But if you're appealing to game developers, I think unless you're trying to sell courses, it's not really worth that much outside of already making an appealing game, and then a gaming YouTuber works out, all right, who is this guy? He has a YouTube channel. It's like, oh, he's legit. All right, cool. I'm I feel more comfortable about covering this guy now. That's about the gain you can get from it. So I would say it's mostly for just a creative outlet and sharing ideas that I have.
Yeah, makes sense. I have really enjoyed this chat, and I also want to respect your time. So let me end you with this one final question. This is the Dev Dream podcast meant to inspire people to make games. And so I'm curious for you, what is your game dev dream?
It is at this moment becoming full time. Now, the thing is, though, I think you normally say in this season of life. I have watched your podcast before. So in this
Yeah,
season
I
of
forgot
life,
that, Bart. Yeah,
in this
what in this
season of
season of
life,
life?
it is to become a full-time game dev. But long term, that is like that is just a milestone. Um, I so I want to be really making so I want to become rich enough to where I can start clawing back a bit more of my artistic integrity. Because I'm having to sacrifice a bit after like learning about marketing. I'm having to sacrifice a bit to try and make more appealing games. And I would like to claw back my artistic integrity by getting enough money to make the games exactly that I want, to take bigger risks, and to really move the medium forward. Because I really care about video games as a medium. It is such a fun, it's such a fun medium that can do so many different things. And yeah, if I can get to a spot where I don't have to care about money, I reckon I'll be able to create some really amazing things in the future. But in this season of life, get to full time first. Get a sustainable income. Make sure that you can just do it.
Well, Brano, that is a fantastic dream. I hope that you're able to make all of that a reality. And thank you for your time today. I had a really fun time interviewing you.
Have a good one, Blake. See you later.
If you are still listening to this conversation, thank you for listening to the entire podcast. You are an absolute OG. Now, I just want to mention one more time that hitting subscribe could really help the channel, as I'm on my way to getting 500, which will open up a new YouTube feature. Also, if you're looking for more game dev interview content, I think you'll enjoy this video on the screen. Thanks again so much for watching. You're the best, and I'll see you in the next one.